Hello everyone, I hope all of you are doing well. So in this video, we will go over Unit 3, which is JavaScript. I'll give a brief introduction about the unit and JavaScript, and we'll go over some of the tutorials that are there in the PowerPoint. Now, so far in the course, we have been concerned, or we were concerned, about how to display our content on a web page and how to style it. We did that using HTML, which was basically structuring your content, and then we used styling or CSS for basically the appearance of our website. Now we're concerned about action. What that means is, what can I do with my website? Um, can I interact with the website? Can I provide information to the website, and can the website do something with that information? Things like that. And that's where JavaScript really comes into play, because JavaScript depends on events or triggers. What happens when the person clicks on a button, or what happens when the browser or the web page or the website is loading? What happens when a form on the website is submitted by the user? So all of that is basically, you can achieve that interactivity on your website using JavaScript. There are other languages as well, but JavaScript is mostly client oriented or client side language. That means it works on the side of the client, which is on the browser. And there are other languages which work on the server, because if you remember, we actually have everything on the server, and the user gets or fetches the website from the server to the browser. They can view the website on the browser, and when they do that, they're considered as a client because they're utilizing whatever, or they're using the website that was hosted on a server. So there are languages that you can use on the client side, which is the browser, and then there are languages that you can use on the server side, and they're majorly for processing data and stuff like that. So that's about JavaScript. Now, don't get it confused with Java. Although programming languages are, kind of similar in approach and in concept, but the syntax differ. So it is not similar to Java. That means you cannot create a variable in JavaScript in a similar way that you were doing, or you were creating it in Java. Okay, and again, this is a programming language. The others, which was HTML and CSS, they're not considered programming languages. They're considered markup languages, but or styling languages. But JavaScript is a programming language. Okay, so with that, let's start. If you remember, if from CSS, if I wanted to add an external or even an internal CSS, I would do that by adding the style tag for the internal CSS, or the link tag for external CSS. Okay, so we'll focus now on internal style, because I want you to relate it to the JavaScript. If you had a style as, for example, if we have a paragraph here that says hello world, let me save that. Now, let's say I want to change the color of this paragraph to be red. So within the style, I would write, for the paragraph, the color should be red. Okay. And if I save that and view it, see, now it's red, which is exactly what we wanted. Now, here, if you notice, I used the style tag for creating that style. And usually we try to add, what's it called? The type, which is text, text/css. That's your internal styling. Similarly, if you want to add JavaScript, and in this course we'll only work with JavaScript, which is, you can say, internal, not external, so embedded. Okay, it's called embedded when you write JavaScript within um, your HTML pages. So for for adding JavaScript, you need to use script tag, similar to style. See how we have style? It starts and it ends at one point. Similarly, for JavaScript, you have something called a script tag, which starts and it also has an ending. Now within this, I should also mention type, which is again text slash JavaScript. So it's very similar to the CSS, right? For CSS, we wrote text slash CSS. And for script, we write text slash JavaScript. Okay, now what can we do in JavaScript? Let's remember. Sorry, I didn't mean let's remember. I said let's try. Okay, let's try to see what is available in JavaScript. Okay, now when you write code in JavaScript, it is executed sequentially. So within the JavaScript tag or within the script tag, whatever you write will be executed. And let's see how that works. So there's a method called alert. Let's see what it does. If you remember methods and functions from Computer Programming 1, they're just pieces of code that you run by just calling the name of the method, right? So there is a method called alert. You provide it what you want it to display. So let's say I'm going to say hello world. Okay, and then you can use semicolon. You can not use semicolon, that's fine. It doesn't have any effect in JavaScript. So if I refresh this, notice this pop-up. This pop-up is what alert does. It basically just displays a pop-up with the text that you give it here. And notice it's still loading. So it's waiting for me to click OK so that it can display the rest of the page. So it's working sequentially. So anytime the user is going to go to the website, it will show up because JavaScript is executing the code one by one. Now, maybe I don't want that to happen, that every time the user comes to my website, I don't want them to see this pop-up dialog. So what can I do in that case? I can create a function which is created by just the keyword function, give it a name, let's say greeting. And then just like any other function, you need those two brackets. And then a starting bracket to signify the start of the function. Okay, and then an ending bracket to signify the end of the function. So this is your basic function in JavaScript. The keyword function, name of the function, the two brackets that represent that it's a function, and then the starting and the ending of the function. Now let's say I write alert here. Hello world. Okay. And now if I refresh, the pop-up is not going to show up because now it's within a function. This, you can relate this by, let's say initially I had the code written just as it was, like without any function. But now I created a small box for this code, which is alert, hello world, and I kept that code within this box. Now, unless and until I'm going to call that box, that code is not going to work. Okay, so a function is just like a box. You keep your code within that box and it's stored there. You still have access to it, but it doesn't execute until you want it to execute. And when you want it to execute, you need to call it. And we'll see how that happens. So now, how can I call it back? There's a, we'll try to, okay, now let's say I want to show it again on when the page is loading. Okay, so there's a trigger, or there's an event which is called onload, which you can use in the body tag, and you can call the JavaScript method greeting from here. So onload is basically a trigger or an event that happens when the page is loading. So you're saying when the body of this page is loading, please call the greeting function for me. And what happens is it checks if there is a function greeting. If there is one, then whatever is written within that function, it gets executed. So similarly, if I now refresh, did I save? Okay. You save it and then you refresh, and now it shows up on load, right? Now, there's another trigger for on resize, and that really means when the page or the web browser is being resized. So again, let's call the same method greeting on resize. So if I refresh this now, that's coming from on load. But then when I make it big, that's again coming from the greeting method, but this time it's coming from on resize. And then again, if I make it small, notice how it showed the alert again. Okay, so that's how on resize works. So basically, on load is a trigger or an event that happens when the page is loading. On resize is when you're resizing the browser, and a function is just a piece of code that you want to execute, not sequentially, but whenever you want it to be called. So whenever you want to execute it, you call it, and that's when the code works. Okay, but now let's say instead of saying hello world, I want to say hello and then the name of the user, right? So let's say in this case, um, I want to say hello to um, a user named Madiha, which is me. Okay, so for that, what we do is we create a variable. Okay, and how do we create variables in JavaScript? You need to put the var um, keyword that signifies that it's a variable. Now in Java, you have data types: string, int, boolean, float, double, all of those. In JavaScript, you don't have any data type. You can just write the word var and it knows it's a variable. You give it a name. Let's say I want to store the name of the user, so or I can just say username. Okay, and then you give it a value. So let's say Maliha. And just like how, if you remember from your CP1 course, if you want to display this username along with hello, you can just write it this way: hello plus username. Okay, save that, and when I refresh, hello, and it takes my name. Now, notice if you write it this way, what happens? It takes the same text, username. Why? Because now, if you put quotations around anything, it considers it as string. Okay, so or text that should be displayed. It doesn't consider it as a variable. So for it to be considered as a variable, do not use the double quotation marks, and to add it to an already present string, you just add the plus sign and plus exclamation. Save that, refresh, and now hello, my name, and then exclamation. Now that's a variable, but not every user will have my name, right? So you can also, using JavaScript, you can also ask the user for their name, and the user that can then provide you their name, and you can use that within the application. Let's see how we can do that. So instead of just hard coding my name there, I will use another method that's already available. Just like alert, there's another method called prompt, and then you just say, you just let the user know what they should give you or what data they should give you. So you'll say, please enter your name. Okay. And if I refresh now, it says enter your name, the exact prompt. I will enter my name here, press on OK, and now it takes the same name and gives me the alert. So that's how you can prompt the user for information, and then display that information using alerts. But you don't normally see websites that function like this, right? So usually you will have forms on websites. For instance, um, or let's skip forms for now. What if I want to, instead of just showing it as an alert, what if I just want to display it back on this space, the white space? For that, what you could do, and before that, if you want to create comments in JavaScript, you can use these two, just like in Java, the double slash. So let's say I want to display it back to this page and not as an alert. So for that, there's a way of doing it in JavaScript. You can write document. That just means that within this document, this whole index.html page. So within this index.html page, just write back. Again, write is a method, and you can provide to it whatever you want to write. Okay, so I'm going to copy that whole hello username. Hello username, which is from the variable, and then exclamation. So let's see what happens this time. So if I refresh, I write my name again. And now notice how it writes back here. You know, it took my name from the input and then it displayed with hello. But what happened is the paragraph that was already there, hello world, is now no longer there, or it's erased or overwritten, right? So how can we avoid that? Let's say I want to have the paragraph that's already there, but I also want to display this hello with the name of the user. So for that, we will create another paragraph or any other tag, and then I will give it an ID. Okay, if you remember it from the previous labs, an ID is just to identify a block or an element within your web page, right? So here, let's say I'm going to name it result. Okay, and if I refresh now, actually, let me stop the on load and on resize so I can show you how it looks before. So this is how it looks right now. It just says hello world, and then there's a paragraph, but it says nothing. Maybe I can just say result is. Okay. So, okay, it says now result is, which is the second paragraph with an ID, and then there's another paragraph, hello world. Instead of writing it directly to document, what I can say is within this document, there's an element, right? This paragraph is considered an element. This paragraph is another element. Body is another element. So I'm saying within this paragraph, within this document, get element by ID, and then I'm specifying the ID. So I'm going to write result. This means that in this document, go and fetch the element that has this ID called result. So what happens is it goes and checks, okay, where is this ID result? It's here. So it takes this whole element. That's why we should have ID as unique, because if you have two IDs with the same name, JavaScript wouldn't know which one to pick, right? So your ID, all your IDs, if you create any IDs in your web page, should be unique. Okay, so I'm going to say document. Within this HTML index.html, there's an element with the ID result. Fetch it and change its inner HTML. Okay, what inner HTML means? Whatever is written within the tag. So this, in this case, result is considered as inner HTML. For this paragraph, hello world is considered as inner HTML. So I'm saying get that element for me and change its inner HTML to, let's say, all of this. Okay. And then I'm going to comment this out. So now I have hello username and then exclamation. So if I save this, refresh. Okay, now the problem is this method is never being called. It is stored, but we never called it, right? So let's say when the user clicks on this paragraph, for that there's a trigger called onClick. So when the user clicks on this paragraph, please go and execute whatever is there in the greeting method. Okay, now if I refresh this, click on hello world, it shows the prompt again, which is from the greeting method. I'm going to enter my name here. Okay, and notice now how it's overwritten. Previously it showed result is, and now it's showing hello Maliha, which is my name from here. Okay, so that's how you can get elements and then change their HTML text, whatever was written there. Okay, now usually you will notice that mostly the forms, mostly websites have forms, right? That means that if you go to any particular website, if you want to contact them, there will be a contact us form. If it's a web application, you will most likely see um, you'll most likely see what was I going to say? Yeah, you'll most likely see um, sorry, I just forgot for a minute what I was talking about. Okay, yeah. So if it's a web application, let's say Instagram, Facebook, all of these, you'll see forms like register, login, forgot password. These are all forms where you want to provide some details and you press a button and something happens. Usually that's how we process data on websites or web application, right? So that's what we'll try to learn here as well. So let's say here I want to create a form, a similar, let's say, login form. How can I do that? I can do it using the form tag. Okay. And then within the form tag, I can, so this form tag specifies that the form is starting from here and then it ends here. So within the form, you should have a couple of fields where the user enters the data and a button to submit the form. Okay, we have seen this previously in one of the labs. If you want to have a rectangle kind of text input where the user provides you text, you can use the input tag for this, and then you specify the type. So let's say type is text, and then if I save this, refresh, you'll notice I can type something within this text box. Okay, and now I can even have a button here. But remember this, when you're using a button for submitting the form, as in when the user is done filling the form and they want to submit all the details, in that case, the type of the button should be submit. Okay, so input type should be submit, and if I just leave it like this, you'll see it shows up as a button, and it takes the text submit. Maybe you don't want that submit text, right? So in that case, you can write value login, let's say. So it changes the text for the button. Now, within this rectangle, I really don't know what to add. You know, it doesn't really show me what, it's just empty. I don't know what to enter for submitting this form. So in that case, you can have something called placeholders for your text inputs. So I can mention here that please enter your username. Okay. And if I refresh, now I know, okay, I need to enter my username here, so I can type something here. Similarly, maybe you need another what's it called? Another input for password, right? So I'm going to use input, type will be password, okay? And then placeholder also will be password. Okay, refresh that. Now I have a password, but if I type, I cannot really see anything, right? And that's how you really take passwords from users. And if you want to see it, you can click on this icon. It shows you the text. And then if you want to hide it again, just click on it again. So that's how you will take passwords from users. Now for each of them, what you can do is you can add an ID to refer to them. Um, Before that, why do we add IDs? Because once you submit the form, let's say you want to trigger a function from the JavaScript, right? So in that case, what you can do is, first of all, what happens when you submit a form? When you submit a form, whatever data that the user gave you, for instance, they gave you their username and their password, right? So you take that data from the client or from the browser, and then you send it to the server. You process it, whether that username exists, whether if it exists, then is the password correct? You process all of that, right? And then you send a response back to the user based on whatever result you got. Now, that sending of data from the client or from the browser to the server, there are two ways of doing that. There's a way called get, and then there's a way called post. Okay, now get is, you just need to remember the basic difference. That's it. You don't need to get into too many details. But for get, which is GET, it's written like this: method get. So for the get, it's like you're sending the username and the password for the user openly, which is like everybody can see it. It's not hidden. It's not, you know, yeah, it's not hidden. Everybody can see it. But if you're sending, if you're sending it through post, it's like you put it in a parcel and then you seal that parcel and nobody can see what's within that parcel, right? That's the basic difference. So when you're using some sensitive data like passwords, addresses, credit card information, you would use post because that's more secure. And then if you're using data that's not really sensitive, then you just use get. In this course, just use get. That's the basic, I think, that you need to use. So I'll change the method to get. And that would mean, okay, take this data and send it to the server. We're not concerned about how we send it to the server or what happens on the server. We're not dealing with that. We're only concerned about the client side. Okay, so here we have a method, and then um, we said get is how we're sending it. Now, what should happen when the person submits this form or when they click on the button login? For that, you have another trigger which is called on submit, which you need to write it with the form. Okay, so you're going to say on submit. Let's say I want to trigger a method which is called process. Okay, it doesn't exist right now in JavaScript, but I'll create that method. But what happens is this trigger or this event is triggered when the person clicks on login. So let's say I create this method process. Okay, and then here I'm going to alert the user that their form was submitted. Let's say just for you to see. So if I refresh this, I click on login. Notice how now it shows me the form was submitted, which is here. And that only happens when I click on the login. and that means that the on submit is triggered.